Hey there, Mr. Reddit here. Welcome back to another episode of r/Entitled Parent Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today. Am I the jerk for not wanting to call my second grader's teacher Dr. Smith? After that, that's not your car, lady. And after that, the things my mother has done to ruin my relationship with my girlfriend. Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen loses her credit card. That's okay, I'll just use yours. So please smash that like button. And if you're new, subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. Am I the jerk for not wanting to call my second grader's teacher Dr. Smith? I have a son in second grade who's in a public school in the US that is fully remote. During the first week of school, I listened in on class. My son's teacher, whom had signed the only email we had from her as Dr. Sarah Smith, told the kids, "My name is Dr. Sarah Smith, but you don't need to call me doctor because I know that can be confusing because I'm not a medical doctor. So you can just call me Sarah, Miss Sarah, or Miss Smith." Our school's norm is calling teachers and staff by their first name. I filed this info away for my own self and went on with my day. A few days later, all the teachers met with families to get to know each other. My son's teacher came into the call and introduced herself as Dr. Sarah Smith. She was quite the talker and spent a lot of time talking about her background and credentials, but seemed pleasant and excited about her job. Near the end, I asked, "Miss Sarah, can we still access the school library?" And she said, "Actually, it's Dr. Smith." I was taken aback because I had recalled her telling my son's class they could call her Miss Sarah. I couldn't figure out how to respond and felt rushed, so I quickly apologized for getting her name wrong and we signed off. Meanwhile, as I've been helping my son with his work, I've been noticing how she signs her messages to students with Miss Sarah and Dr. Sarah Smith with the parents. In the classes, the students were calling her both Sarah and Miss Sarah. I was confused. Fast forward to this week when we had our second parent-teacher meeting. Once again, my son's teacher jumped headlong into our meeting without much greeting and spent most of the time talking. When I finally had the chance to speak, I once again addressed her as Miss Sarah, and she once again corrected me saying, "Actually, it's Dr. Smith." So I said, "I'm glad this came up because I've overheard you say to the students they can call you Miss Sarah, and my son refers to you as that at home, so that's where my confusion is coming from." She replied, "With parents, I prefer to be called Dr. Smith." And then she steamrolled on until it was time to go. Now, I feel certain she's just power tripping here. I don't want to feed her ego, nor continue creating confusion in our house when my kid talks about his teacher, Miss Sarah, and I'm talking to him about Dr. Smith. Yes, I'm a jerk for thinking, is the doctor really warranted here? We are just dealing with teaching a bunch of 8-year-olds how to capitalize proper nouns and what division is. But I get there was likely more to her degree than that, and I can put that all aside when it comes to being respectful and honoring people's wishes. However, all of this had made me feel like just referring to her generally from here on out. So folks, am I missing out on some cultural norm here? Am I the jerk here for not wanting to call her Dr. Smith and feeling like she's being egotistical? Well, who do you agree with, OP or Dr. Smith? Please let us know.
If I were that teacher, I wouldn't make the children's parents call me doctor. I'd like to think I'd show a little more humility. But at the same time, if she'd like to be called doctor, I would have no problem addressing her that way.
That's not your car, lady. So this happened around 2008. My buddy Brock had gotten out of the military after 10 years. He had started in the Marines, but transitioned into the Army for the last 4 years before buying a house in Texas. When he got out, he did a variety of jobs before landing a gig with a repo service. He worked there for a year and had a lot of wild stories, but this one sticks out the most as he helped a fellow soldier get revenge on an evil ex. Brock was at the office speaking with his manager, whom I'll refer to as Karen. Now, this particular Karen had a lot of Karen-like qualities, but was a force for good, if you can believe that. While they were talking, they see a young man enter the office. They immediately noticed he had 2 black eyes and an arm was in a sling. The young man, whose name I unfortunately never learned, but I'll call him Ben, asked how hard it would be for them to help repossess his car. Karen called her daughter in, Karen Jr., and had her pour Ben a cup of coffee. Karen then asked Ben to tell her a story. Ben began with telling her that he had just returned from a deployment. He had been dating a local girl that lived outside of the famous Fort Hood. Not a good idea, by the way, before the deployment. Thanks to a previous deployment, he had managed to get himself a used black Dodge Charger, which was his baby. He further explained that shortly after buying the car, he had met the local girl, who for the sake of the story, I'll call Morgan. Morgan was always asking to drive his car, but he would always decline. When he was getting ready for his deployment, Morgan repeatedly asked if she could borrow the car, but he kept saying no. After much needling, he relented, but on the condition that she take care of his apartment until he comes back from rest and relaxation leave. She agreed. Ben left for his deployment while Morgan took care of his place. When Ben came back for leave, he found his apartment immaculate. He pulled his car from storage, drove to Morgan's. He spent a few days with her before handing her the keys and heading to his home state to visit family before returning to his deployment. He returned again from his deployment and found nothing but trouble. When he walked into his apartment, he found a layer of dust on just about every surface. It was almost like no one had been there in months. When he checked his bedroom, he found his room had been torn apart. All of his drawers had been searched and upturned. He tried to call Morgan, but never received an answer. He located his safe, which was hidden, and found it hadn't been touched. He then grabbed his spare key from the safe, called a buddy of his, and they went to Morgan's. As they pulled up to Morgan's, he saw a car there that he initially didn't recognize, but as they got closer, he realized it was his baby. Morgan had the car painted hot pink and put 24-inch spinners on it. He tried the key just to make sure, and the lights flickered as it unlocked. While his buddy laughed, Ben went to the front door and Morgan answered. He asked what happened to his car, and she responded, "It's my car now." Ben walked away and hopped in his hot pink mess. As he started it, 4 large dudes come out of Morgan's house, one with a baseball bat, and they yanked Ben out of the car. They proceeded to knock him out in the driveway before his friend intervened. He then took Ben to the hospital. I'm honestly not sure if the cops were called on this. I'd assume yes, but even then, Ben said his friend drove by Morgan's house a handful of times while he was in the hospital at random times and the car was never there. Karen stared at Ben for a bit before asking for the paperwork. Ben handed it to her and Karen had a smile form on her face. She then asked Ben for Morgan's phone number. Ben gave it but wasn't aware of what was about to happen. Karen handed the phone to Karen Jr., who then dialed the number. Karen Jr. then began speaking to Morgan, telling her that they had met at one of the local clubs and wanted to know if she was down to party that night. Apparently, Morgan agreed and the plan was set. Brock parked his tow truck at the club and waited. Sure enough, Morgan showed up with the hot pink monster, parked it, and went inside with some girlfriends. Brock gave them 5 minutes before he stealthily drove up to the car and hooked it up. As he was pulling out with the pink monster, Morgan walked out of the club. She saw her car in the tow truck and began trying to flag Brock down, but he was already out of there. The next day, it was business as usual at the office when Morgan called. She was furious that her car was stolen by them and wanted it back. Karen, using her best customer service voice, told her if she had the registration, she could come pick it up. Morgan began screaming louder that she was going to call the cops, at which point Karen sarcastically told her, "Please do," then hung up on her. As this phone call was going on, Brock happened to look out the window and saw Morgan standing next to a car in a vacant lot, throwing what appeared to be a temper tantrum. After Karen hung up, Brock watched her get in the car on the passenger side. Karen then looked out the window and had Brock verify it was her. She then began to smirk. Karen then proceeded to call the owner of the property Morgan and her friend were occupying. She told the owner about the car and asked if he wanted it towed. The owner okayed it. Brock then drove his truck over to the ladies in the car and introduced himself. They tried to explain that they were waiting for Morgan's boyfriend, but Brock insisted they weren't allowed to park there. They argued and called him every name in the book. Brock then hooked up their car and lifted it partially off the ground, forcing the two to exit the vehicle. They tore into him until he showed them the tow order. While this back and forth was going on, Ben arrived at the office and Morgan saw him walk in. She ran to the office door and Brock proceeded to lower the car. When Brock went back to the office, all heck had broken loose. Morgan apparently tried to snag the keys back from Ben, but he had pocketed them. She began to hit him in his hurt arm and warned Ben that she'd call her friends to finish the job if she didn't get her keys back. Karen Jr. had already called the cops at this point, and Brock got in between Ben and Morgan, even telling Morgan to try hitting him to find out what would happen. Morgan then tried to play the pity card and said she only wanted the keys to get her laptop out for school. Karen asked Ben to hand the keys over to Brock so he could grab the laptop. Brock retrieved the laptop from the car, and as he was handing it over, she rushed to aggressively grab it but knocked it from Brock's hands. Completely furious at this point, Morgan accused Brock of dropping the computer on purpose and threatened to sue. At this point, the cops arrived. Morgan began her sob story again, this time telling the police that they stole her car. The police questioned Karen, and Karen gave her usual smirk while asking if they wanted to see the security videos. The police watched and listened as Morgan punched Ben several times and heard the threats she made about sending her friends after him. The police then turned to Morgan, who had turned ghost white at this point. She then tried to make her way to the door, but the police stopped her. They proceeded to ask her about the car, Ben's injuries, and who she planned on sending after him. She initially denied everything, but they already had the video evidence. She was arrested, and Ben got his car back. After the cops left, Ben admitted he didn't want to be seen in a car that looked like it was advertising Pepto-Bismol and planned on trading it in for a GTO. We later heard through the grapevine that the 4 guys who'd beat him up were later arrested. Morgan had ratted them out. Brock had a few more stories, but none of them were nearly as good as this one. Have you ever had someone take something that belonged to you? If so, were you able to get it back? Please let us know. The things my mother has done to ruin my relationship with my girlfriend. I've posted several stories about my mother behaving like crap towards my relationship and my girlfriend, Eva. Today, this has definitely ended in my and Eva's favor. My mother won't bother us anymore. My mother is a very rude, insensitive, arrogant, obtuse person. She never liked Eva, nor, initially, the idea of me dating at all, but it reached new heights when we moved in together. Moreover, into the house she thought she would inherit one day. It's my grandparents' old house, and they couldn't take care of it anymore, so they moved out. My mother doesn't like her for several reasons. Eva is of foreign descent. She also has a skin condition and commits a serious crime because of it, vitiligo, by being happy and proud of herself for it, and being very straightforward with what she thinks about something/someone. While this might come off as flaunting it, Eva is easily the most beautiful, most amazing, and kindest person I have ever met, and I love her more than anything and anyone else. I don't even know if I deserve her. Anyway, ever since my mother somehow came to terms with me dating, she was commenting all the time about how I deserve better, how she is not the right one for you, how she's with you only because you're the only one desperate enough to like her, and how you'll break up anyways, as teenage love doesn't last. Well, that was more than 2 years ago, and it doesn't seem like it's anywhere near ending. One time, she berated me for breaking my wrist when I took the shortest route to provide first aid to Eva. Now, not to brag, but basically saving her life after some accident when we were out in the forest together, and then called me a drama queen when the accident actually traumatized me. Another problem with my mother came almost 1 year ago. She was becoming a couch potato. I had an insane workload on my back. She didn't do anything to help, but always complained about me being lazy when I found the free time to spend time with Eva or just play some games. This has led me to the thought of moving out. Further on, all the way until last week, is documented by several stories I've written about her in the past months. In short, insulting Eva, always complaining, dropping chocolate-topped cookies in front of Eva's dog, and insulting it after Eva asked her to be careful, trying to hook me up with someone else, making a scene at a family dinner, insulting Eva's family background. Now on to this week. My family members have gotten the wind of something happening between my parents, and apparently my mother told them that I accused her of something, only to cause problems between my parents, which is BS, because the only one waving accusations around is my mother. Most of my family really likes Eva, so some either don't trust my mother or are gullible because they know of something my mother has already done. My phone was flooded with messages from my family members asking what happened and how could I accuse her of something like that. My mother told them that I accused her of insulting Eva's heritage and attacking her, which my mother has actually done. So I just straight out sent screenshots to the ones who believed that I accused my mother. This spread very fast, and to my knowledge, most of my family has blocked her. And so finally did I. My father is about to file for divorce. Not going to lie, if he gets custody of my brother, and he's most likely to, it's only good for him, as my mother is a very crappy burden. Lazy manager reneges on a request after I describe what they want. This malicious compliance comes from my girlfriend, Jessica, not her real name. For background, my girlfriend is a software test engineer at a computer science-related company. She has a lot of jobs there, but one of them involves the review of bugs in the application, which she sees in the form of a ticket. For background, When Jessica started working at this company, her manager Bob would force every new hire to attend meetings every day, going over the ticketing system in excruciating detail, even though all of the new hires stated that they had used them before and didn't need another tutorial. This finally culminated in her manager stating in front of the whole team that the new hires couldn't attend a meeting as they had to go over the ticketing software, and all of the new hires resoundingly stating they didn't need any more tutorials and would be able to attend, which they did. These tickets got sent to various people, test engineer managers or developers, etc., and in order for them to be closed, the bug needs to be reproduced by the person who wants to close it, and a fix to prevent the bug needs to be added to the code of the product. Here is where the malicious compliance takes place. Jessica is reviewing a ticket documenting a bug in the product, and she consults her manager. The ticket gets sent to her manager, who is tasked with reproducing it in order to develop a patch for said bug. Instead of this, her manager asks her to close the ticket herself, as he can't reproduce the bug. This is clearly not how the ticket reporting works, as the whole point is that open tickets have not been fixed yet. Jessica would just close it since her manager Bob told her to, and she only has worked there for a few months. The only problem with this is that the ticket reporting software requires a reason for closing the ticket to be documented, so people know who to talk to should issues occur. Since Jessica is new, people would expect her to make mistakes, and it wouldn't be the end of the world if she incorrectly closed a ticket. But she wasn't down to take the fall for something she had no control over. Since Jessica needs to add a reason for closing the ticket and doesn't want to go against the request of her manager, she writes back to him, "Sorry you can't reproduce it. What should I do?" Manager: "Go ahead and close the ticket. Can't reproduce the bug." Jessica: "Sure. Since you mentioned in the tutorial on the ticketing software that all tickets require a reason for closing, I'll close it and add a reason. Bob can't reproduce the bug, and I was advised by Bob to close it." Her manager immediately replies back, as he apparently just realized what the description of his job was, and tells her not to close the ticket and that he will work immediately to reproduce the issue so it can be documented. Since this, her manager has appropriately documented every ticket she sent without any inane comments. Have you ever had a lazy manager who tried to make you take the fall for them? Please let us know.
You mean to tell me I can't even trust the managers anymore?
You said any character. Background. The summer before I entered high school, the Ministry of Education decided to change the standardized testing they used for entry to universities. It had happened in the past, and usually it took a year to implement changes. But this plan was really complicated and needed 2 years to implement. Laymen like you and me can't comprehend. It's called throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. Guess which class got to be the lab rats? Yup, mine. We started school with only a vague idea of what the changes will be, until mid-October. Then we learned that the first changes will be implemented on the midterms. The midterms used to be 2 weeks and provided 40% of the final grade, but the new plan was a full month and count for only 20% towards the final grade. Also, a major player for the malicious compliance was our literature teacher. Let's call her Karen. Now, I have to admit, she was good at her subject. The problems in her teaching came from prejudice and preconceptions. On a 25-people class, she used to work with 4 or 5 of them to be specific kids from upper-class families or the best part of town. The rest of us were just background for her. A few of the parents had complained, but due to reasons we learned later, she was always engaging during inspections and kept her job. The malicious compliance. Midterms time. It's one of the new tests. It's creative writing. Now, as I said, this was one of the new tests. The ministry had said general instructions for the tests, but left the specifics to each school. So for this one, Karen set the specifics. The general instructions for this one asked from the teacher to pick a book from the syllabus and the pupil to write at least 800 words from the point of view of one of the characters. Karen just loved epics, so she chose the Iliad, expecting everyone to pick a hero. Everybody did, except 3 of us, JK, Indy, and myself. I don't know if we wanted to rebel against the system or against Karen, but the 3 of us didn't follow the norm. Now, JK was a really good student, but he had the usual trouble in Karen's class. She chose Andromache, the wife of Hector. She described the last day of Hector from Andromache's point of view. My friend Indy is a mythology buff. He became an archaeologist, that's why Indy, and absolutely hated Karen's teachings of the material. He picked Zeus. He basically wrote Zeus's point of view. Me, I chose Cassandra. She had the gift of prophecy, but the curse of never being believed. I went the whole point of view being, we're all doomed, and never believed. The results came out and we are the only failed, 8, 7, and 7 out of 20, because we, according to Karen, completely missed the point of the test. But the aftermath. Unbeknownst to everybody except the principal, the ministry had sent instructions to grade the tests independently of the teachers. They published their grades, and 3 particular tests have huge grade discrepancies. So one misty morning, the 3 of us are called into the meeting room. Inside is our principal, a clearly fuming Karen, and 3 people we don't know. They introduce themselves as part of the Ministry of Education. They want us to explain why did we choose these characters. We all said, it said any character, so we chose one we liked. Every time we said that, they glanced at Karen. They thanked us, told us that their grade will go towards our final grade. Karen had inspectors drop in on her unexpectedly. As I said in the beginning, she had passed the local ones because of something she did. She was having an affair with the assistant director of the local education department, and he always notified her before the inspection. Now they came directly from the ministry, and she was always unprepared. She was allowed to finish the year, and then she was dismissed. The ministry took a year and a half to figure out the system. We were the first class to officially take the new standardized test. Creative writing was part of the literature exam. JK became a journalist and a writer. Indy became an archaeologist. As for me, I'm in here. Have you ever had a teacher who graded you unfairly? If so, what did you do about it? Please let us know.
When I was in 2nd grade, I had a teacher who made my mother call her doctor when they spoke.
Am I the jerk for telling our new neighbor my son doesn't work for her and her daughter? This has been going on for 2 long months now. We had a new neighbor who's a single mother in her late 40s and her teenage daughter. They're both lovely, and she told me that she got divorced not too long ago. Her family lives in another town, and she's beginning her life as a single mother. My son, 16, has been helping them since day one. He has helped them move their stuff into their new house and even unpack boxes. She would have him go to the grocery store with a list of things she and her daughter needed. She'd ask him to fix a door handle or take away the garbage, fix her car, move stuff to the backyard, clean the garden, and so on. She wouldn't stop asking favors here and there. She'd knock on my door and borrow him for a few hours. Then he comes back in almost 6 hours and still has to study and has barely taken care of his own mess. He has a math exam this week, and he started concentrating on it, which is difficult and it takes time. Our neighbor called me to send him to her house so he could help her move furniture and carpets. She has huge carpets that are so heavy to lift. I told her he was busy studying for his exam, but after 30 minutes, I saw her daughter at our door, asking for my son to come and hang out with her. My son said it was okay since he said he'd be gone for an hour. Next thing I know, he got back at 9 p.m. That's 5 hours later, looking wet and extremely tired and worn out. He told me our neighbor had him clean up furniture and carpets, about 5 to 6 heavy carpets, and clean the entire living room after. I was so mad, my son couldn't even finish studying. He took a bath and went to sleep instantly. I called my neighbor and raised my voice because I was really mad at her for making my son exhausted and costing him his math exam the next day. I told her that my son doesn't work for her and her daughter and to stop calling him and sending her daughter to our house, and I hung up. My husband spoke with her and he was furious. Said that I have no respect for our neighbor and that I shouldn't berate her for just needing some help and that I have no right to not let her daughter into our house. My husband said I shouldn't say anything since our son is okay with it. He's not. Although he said nothing, he's not the type that would talk about what bothers him and instead just do what others ask of him. Well, who do you agree with, OP or her husband? Please let us know.
OP's right, husband's an idiot. Next.
Am I the jerk for not checking the house? I, 30 female, live on a ranch with multiple horses, a few barn cats, and my service dog. Because of an accident when I was a teen, I am legally deaf and have very limited hearing normally, but do all right with a hearing aid. Unless you're shouting next to me, if I don't have my hearing aid in, I can't hear you. Because of spikes in my country, most major metro areas went into lockdown. My brother, 32 male, and his wife, 30 female, were afraid to be in the city with their new baby, 6 months old, and my brother asks if they could stay with me in the countryside. I agreed as long as they cleaned up after themselves and respected my animal's space. Me and my sister-in-law get along okay, but we've never been close. She doesn't know much sign language, so I have to rely on lip reading when we talk. I really only use my hearing aid when I go out, but I've gotten used to not wearing it at home, which is where the problem is. My brother had to go into the city over the weekend for work, leaving me, sister-in-law, and the baby alone for the weekend. On Saturday, I get up, and while making breakfast, I see that both my brother's car and sister-in-law's car are gone. I think nothing of it and begin my morning routine. By noon, my sister-in-law's car comes back and I'm training a colt. A bit later, the colt spooks bad and starts pulling away from me. I try to calm him, but a hand gripping my shoulder and spinning me around forces me to let go. Sister-in-law was screaming at me. I was only getting every other word and struggling to read her lips because she was talking so fast. Apparently, the night before, at some point she had told me she was going into town to shop but didn't want to take the baby, so she asked if I could watch her. To her, I answered, and she took it as a yes. So this morning, she went shopping and left the baby for 3 hours. I told her I never heard her request, and had I known, I would have absolutely watched the baby. She called me a negligent monster for not checking the house and just assuming she took the baby. I told her that that was unreasonable and asked why she didn't make sure I understood before she left. She called me a plethora of insults and stormed upstairs. I feel awful. The baby had cried all morning and I had no idea. It makes me sad and sick thinking about it. I tried to reconcile with my sister-in-law, but she won't talk or look at me. My brother came back late Sunday and agreed with his wife that I should have checked the house before going out to take care of the animals and that his daughter comes first. I told them their baby is their responsibility and my animals are mine, and that sister-in-law should have really made sure I understood her request before leaving. We fought, and now things are tense. I don't feel like I'm the jerk because I'm opening my home to them. I'm not a babysitter, and if sister-in-law had a request, I feel she should have made it clear. But on the other hand, my poor niece was left for 3 hours, and now even my parents are calling me negligent. Am I wrong for not checking the house to see if anyone was home? Well, who do you agree with? OP or her sister-in-law? Please let us know.
She needs to kick them out ASAP. Their entitlement gives mine a run for its money.
The most blatant shoplifting I've ever seen. Okay, so I work at a certain store that sells things for $5 or less, and I've seen kids try to stuff chips in their big coat pockets, take a quick snack from the 10-cent candy when they think nobody's looking, all that fun stuff. But today was just the dumbest attempt at shoplifting that I have ever seen. So it's just me and my manager. So while she's cleaning, I'm keeping watch over the register and doing inventory in between sales. Eventually, this lady comes up to my register with her kid in a stroller, looking absolutely dead to the world, and places a few items on the counter. I'm ringing her up like normal until I notice a Peppa Pig play pack sticking out of the stroller. It's not hidden or anything, so I figured her kid was holding it and that she just forgot about it. So I pointed it out and asked if she was buying it. Customer:
Oh no, that's hers, you see? She brought it from home.
Ah, okay, sure. Your unconscious 3-year-old brought along an unopened play pack on her and mom's trip to the store. I'm already ready to call this woman out on it, but benefit of the doubt, right? She could have brought it from home and then fell asleep, but then this woman kept talking.
Wow, you guys sell this here? I've never seen it in your store.
She readjusts it in the stroller.
Hold on to it and don't lose it.
Now, as she's readjusting it, I almost burst into laughter then and there. Me: Ma'am, may I see the play pack? Now, it took a bit of arguing, but I guess she decided she can convince me it was hers. So, as I'm holding on to it, I start questioning her. Me: So, you say that your daughter brought this unopened play pack from home, correct?
Yes, she did.
And you say you've never seen it in our store before, correct?
Yes, you don't sell them here. I haven't seen them once, and I don't appreciate being talked to like this.
At this, I flip the package over and point to the bright yellow sticker that clearly says, store name, $5. Her face goes pretty red, so I offered to let her add it to her transaction or leave it here, because it was most definitely not her daughter's. In the end, she left it at the store after walking out, saying many words that should not have been said in front of her kid. Thankfully, she was still asleep. It honestly sucks because people think they can get away with all kinds of crap at our location because we don't have security, just observant cashiers. I was actually told during my training to not confront shoplifters, which makes me so angry. There's nothing I hate more than dishonesty, and it makes me wonder how many people I've sent off with a smile had stolen items in their pockets. Fired because a Karen lies. When I was about 18, I was working for X Home Improvement. I won't be giving out their name because I don't want it to backfire on me. I had been a cashier there for about a year and was top dog in terms of extended protection plans and MDA donations. MDA is Muscular Dystrophy Association. This isn't all that important to the story, but feeds into why I still hold a grudge against the store for it. I had been homeless for most of the time I maintained this job. I was 19 at the time, but I finally had gotten a home because my grandparents moved close to my work and offered to let me stay with them to save up money, and I took that offer. I had gone to work on a day like just about any other and was my normal goofy self. I would sing along with songs that played overhead, jokingly dance, and goof around with my coworkers. I see a lady coming toward the registers, so I flag her down to let her know I'm open, and she enters my lane. This is the Karen, by the way. Not knowing she was a Karen, I decided to try and joke around a little bit. I was standing there holding my scale gun in a James Bond pose, pretending to sweep the area with it. Not actually pressing the button, but just like a spy would when clearing a room. And then I hear it.
Excuse me? Why the heck are you pointing that thing at me?
Me. I'm sorry?
Why are you threatening me with that?
Ma'am, I'm not intending anything as a threat. I apologize if you mistook my actions, but I was just goofing around with some of my coworkers while I was waiting for you to pull up to my register.
Well, don't ever do that again.
I apologized to her and went about scanning her items. Just a few odds and ends and a rug. I carried on with my day as she seemed fine. She walked out of the door with a huge smile on her face, and I thought I had done a good job. I get a call from my manager telling me to report to the HR office immediately. I'm a little concerned, asking myself if it could be about the lady. I didn't know what was going on, but I maintained a positive attitude. My dad always says, think positive and positive things will come your way. I get there and the door cracked open. I push it lightly and see the store manager and the assistant manager as well as the HR lady sitting there. Store manager. OP, please have a seat. Assistant manager, would you please read him the complaint? Assistant manager just kind of glares at me before reading the paper he had in his hand. Well, we had a lady call up here about 20 minutes ago, absolutely bawling her eyes out, saying that you threatened her. She said you pointed the scanner at her. She stated when you were asked to stop that you glared at her and threatened her, calling her really mean names and saying that you were going to track her down after you got off of work. I was in utter shock. My heart sank to my stomach and tears began to well up in my eyes. I could not believe somebody would lie to someone about me like this. They made me seem like I belong in some hillbilly horror movie. I knew what was coming, and I tried to reason with them, but I couldn't convince them to be on my side. They are hard believers in the Karen mantra, the customer is always right. Store manager. OP, I understand that you're upset right now, but you cannot say these things to a customer. Now, I'm sorry, but we are going to have to let you go. Leave your name tag and your vest here with us. You have 10 minutes to collect your things. After you leave here today, you are banned from the premises for 15 months. I ripped my name tag and vest off and just threw it on the ground, trying to get out of there before they started. I walked down to the nearest grocery store parking lot and sat on a natural hill for hours, crying because I had been so harshly blindsided. I wouldn't even get to tell my side of the story. They fired me on a Class A violation, which means I am not hireable by any ex-improvement store in the country. I wound up getting a job at Walmart, which was also ended because of an entitled Karen. I'll post it later if you guys want. They didn't even review the footage because I know if they had, they wouldn't have fired me. Sadly, there isn't a satisfying end to this one. It's just a tale of getting done over by a Karen. I hope you all enjoyed the read.
Come watch this video next, you will love it. And if you join as a channel member today, we'll give you a special shout out in our next video. And to have us record any kind of video you'd like us to, just come visit us on Fiverr. Link pinned in the comments below.